Tonight, the official benchmark of his first 100 days in office. He will highlight police reform, we're told in his speech next Wednesday. Now, Republicans plan to counter with the architect of their police reform bill, which, by the way, you'll remember, Democrats filibustered. Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. Tonight, the White House is putting the finishing touches on an exceptionally aggressive effort to both unwind the Trump administration's agenda, as well as advance executive actions and legislation that have gone down remarkably well with progressives, such as a new push to cut American emissions in half and even actually remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Listen to Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tie together climate change and all sorts of other things.
The trampling of indigenous rights is a cause of climate change. The trampling of racial justice is a cause of climate change.
For clarification, the Minnesota chapter of the Sierra Club puts it this way. To protect the planet, we must dismantle systemic racism wherever it exists. We must dismantle harmful police systems and replace them with real investments in people and communities. And while the Border Patrol continues to tweet out heart-wrenching images, the White House still refuses to acknowledge the massive migrant surge is a crisis. But for the past 93 days, they have used the term climate crisis repeatedly.
This is a crisis. It is the climate crisis.
When I think about climate crisis,
by 2030, so that we could actually once again lead the world in this effort to address our climate crisis.
We kick things off with White House correspondent Kevin Corke reporting tonight on the mixed messaging from the Biden administration. Good evening, Kevin.
Evening, Shannon. Now, political scientists actually have a term for this. They like to call what's happening right now in D.C. flooding the zone. That is to say, when a party in power promotes and proposes policies that standing alone might not get real serious consideration at all, but in a sea of ideas just might slip through. It actually works more often than you might think, and Democrats in the White House are banking on it. What critics call a basically open border, billions for pet projects disguised as COVID relief, and billions more for items that are laughably described as infrastructure. All policies that define the Democrats' takeover of the U.S. government. And just the beginning of what promises to be a fairly lengthy progressive wish list.
Well, President Biden strongly supports D.C. statehood, and our administration will work with Congress to get it passed.
The latest on the Democrats' to-do list? Statehood for Washington, D.C., which passed the House on a party line vote today, but faces virtually insurmountable odds of ever making it out of the Senate.
This bill is not about civil rights. It's not really about enfranchising or disenfranchising people. This is about Mr. Nadler and Ms. Pelosi and Senator Schumer and others trying to consolidate liberal power. This is a moral imperative, an economic imperative, a moment of peril, but also a moment of extraordinary possibilities.
While statehood for the district may prove a political long shot, the Biden administration's international green policies will very likely be paved with your taxpayer green. Today, the White House at its Global Climate Summit pledged the country will cut greenhouse gas emissions in half in the not-too-distant future, and challenged top polluters, China and India, to do more to reduce carbon output. Mr. Biden also renewed the U.S. pledge to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, which, according to some estimates, could cost the U.S. up to $3 billion annually. And speaking of money, there are new reports tonight that the administration is preparing a major cash grab on wealthy investors, planning to raise federal tax rates on capital gains for some investors to as high as 43.4%. For New Yorkers, the combined state and federal capital gains rate could be as high as 52.22%. For Californians, a staggering 56.7%. Pretty incredible when you think about those numbers. Now, this is all happening as the number of U.S. citizens looking to renounce their citizenship is actually exploding. According to Americans Overseas, that's a European-based organization that specializes in U.S. tax prep, a record 6,705 Americans gave up their citizenship in 2020, and just for perspective, that's up about 260% from 2019, with, you guessed it, taxes being the top issue. Shannon?
Listen, we all want to save money, but I am not abandoning my country over that.
Yeah.
I do wish my taxes were lower like everybody else, but I am staying put.
Leave
Okay,
America?
now Kevin, I
Right.
want to. I know. Okay, I want to talk to you about the 6-3 decision out of the Supreme Court today. This case, Jones v. Mississippi. The challenges rejected a challenge to life sentences without parole for justices. This involved a 15-year-old who killed his grandfather.
Yeah.
Justice Kavanaugh wrote for the majority. He said this in part, quote, "A state's discretionary sentencing system is both constitutionally necessary and constitutionally sufficient." But check out Justice Sotomayor's dissent and Justice Thomas's very pointed footnote. Quite a difference of opinion among these justices on this case.
Yeah, very interesting, because this again is really the separation of powers as we know it in this country. Often you will have a legislative branch decide that this particular policy or a different policy, for example, is the way to go, but really it's really about the courts really stepping in. What I found most interesting is in reading the dissent, I mean, Justice Thomas is so unique just in the notes, but I really felt like this didn't surprise me as much as perhaps it surprised some legal scholars, and you as an attorney can obviously look and sort of unpack what happened today, but I thought it didn't surprise me probably as much as maybe it surprised a lot of the other observers out there. What about you?
Yeah, well, Justice Sotomayor's dissent was all about the fact, and listen, she's been involved as a prosecutor in this criminal law
right.
space, and so she knows about this, and she said that she wants to be sure that juvenile offenders aren't sentenced in a way that they have absolutely no hope of ever getting out or showing that they can be rehabilitated. But I want to read something Justice Thomas said in a footnote. He said, "It's curious how this court's view of the maturity of minors ebbs and flows depending on the issue." He said, "We want to give them all the breaks in the world when it comes to this," but he said also when it comes to abortion, you think that they should be able to decide everything for themselves. So are they adults or not when it comes to these really difficult decisions? Definitely a family dispute on display for the court with this one.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And not just as far as abortion, but also transgender rights. A lot of people saying, well, they're young enough to make decisions, or even making these decisions absent parental notification in some school districts of a variety of different cases. So very interesting indeed.
Well, Kevin, you don't have to be a lawyer to be on the Supreme Court. There's no requirement. So if they decide to pack the court with 4 more justices, maybe we should wait for the call.
I'm with you.
See you later, Kevin.
All right.